Well, welcome to Cool Talk. Today we're going to talk about Game of Thrones. It is official. Game of Thrones is a master cluster fudge, a big mess, and people are frustrated. The show has been rushed, story arcs going nowhere, and who are we going to blame? Let's talk about it. And we're going to start with the author, George R.R. Martin. As long as HBO had to follow George R.R. Martin's storyline in his books, with a few variations, everything was fine. It forced him to follow the outline. But George R.R. Martin's last book in the series was published in 2011, 8 years ago. He has 2 more books left. And if George R.R. Martin had written at least 1 page a day, HBO would have almost 3,000 pages of material to work off of. HBO writers David Benioff and D.B. Weiss wrote the series of Game of Thrones on HBO. And when they got past the books, people thought that this is why the series has suffered. I don't think so, because the books ended with Jon Snow's death. That was at the end of season 5. Season 6 was very good. It was around season 7 that things started to get bad. So what happened? Program president Michael Lombardo from HBO was in agreement with George R.R. Martin that there should be 30 more episodes for seasons 7, 8, and there would be a season 9. But the writers didn't agree to that. They wanted to move on. They were going to be working on a Star Wars trilogy. So HBO offered them, well, how about 20 episodes? They said no. And finally they agreed to have a season 7 and 8 and only have 13 episodes. So think about that. From 30 episodes of story, we're dropping down to only 13. HBO should have gotten new writers, but they decided to stick to these 2 because they were with the show from the very beginning. So they ran with it, and literally ran with it, rushed the story, dropping subplots and going faster and faster. So the story and the characters suffered. How so? Oh boy, let me count the ways. When Jon Snow and Daenerys fall in love, it's just a plot device. There was no time to develop any chemistry between these 2 characters. We didn't get to see them have love blossom and have them have their first argument outside of anything besides politics. I mean, there was just nothing there. There was not enough time. In entertainment romances, you need time to develop chemistry so the audience feels invested in these characters. And if you say, well, no, Game of Thrones is different. No, it's not. Think of Ned Stark and Catelyn. There was genuine love and affection there. There was Shae and Tyrion. There was Robb and Talisa. You had Jaime and Brienne. You also had Jaime and Cersei, as sick as that sounds. You had the doomed romance with Jon Snow and Ygritte. So when Jon Snow hooks up with Daenerys, you need to have time to develop the chemistry. If you have a hamburger, you need time to cook it. I mean, Gendry and Arya, well, they kind of fell in love, hooked up, had sex, and broke up in 1.5 episodes. Look at the beginning of episode 5. Varys decides to poison Daenerys. He sends letters out to announce that Jon Snow is a true heir. He gets a little girl to handle the poison in the kitchen, but Daenerys won't eat. He speaks to Jon Snow and fails to convince him to take the throne. Jon Snow says no. Daenerys confronts Tyrion and tells him that there's a traitor in the group. And oh, by the way, we have your brother arrested. Tyrion confesses that Varys is a traitor. Varys is executed. All this happened inside of the first 12 minutes. The character of Varys deserved better. And I have to say on a side note that the chemistry between Peter Dinklage and Conleth Hill is excellent. Here's how I would have handled it. This is how Game of Thrones used to be. Let's just say Varys confronts Jon Snow first, tries to convince him to take the throne. Jon Snow gets angry and they have a big argument. So now Varys, scared, starts to send out letters. He's scared. He thinks he betrayed the queen. So he gets this little girl to spy for him in the kitchen and to put poison inside the food. You see him send out the ravens with all these little letters. We didn't know where he was sending them to, but this time we do. By the way, the little girl is the same little girl that was in the crypt with him in the Battle of Winterfell. Well, anyway, you see her in the kitchen adding the poison to the food. You see Varys getting increasingly nervous. And then afterwards, we see Daenerys depressed, refusing to eat. And somehow she discovers that there's poison in the food. How? Well, I don't know, maybe a cat comes along and chews on the food and dies, and she discovers there's a traitor in my group. Meanwhile, we see Jaime Lannister being caught outside of King's Landing and getting arrested. He's brought before Daenerys by either Grey Worm or Davos. So at this point, Daenerys calls for Tyrion. Tyrion comes up to her and he confesses. Now, Varys sees Tyrion go over to Daenerys. He starts to panic, so he starts to write even more letters, but he is caught and he is executed. This is how it should have been. This is what Varys deserved. And if we had done this, it would have taken most or all of one episode. It would have been great. We would have had time to invest in the characters, but also assimilate all this quick information slowly. This would have given us some time to also spend a little while with Brienne, sad because of Jaime betraying her, Sansa conniving, a little bit of Arya and the Hound riding their horses, see Cersei doing something besides looking over the balcony, and spending a little time with Daenerys, sensing her solitude, hanging with her dragon because at this moment she has no friends. HBO would have done this magnificently. And where is Bronn? Well, maybe we'll see him in episode 6. But now I'm going to talk about another issue, and that is the misuse of the character Tyrion. Tyrion was, for a while, the most cleverest person on the show, a fan favorite. Daenerys recognized this and made him the Hand, her advisor. But lately, Daenerys has been, well, messing up. Why has he become so inept? My guess is that he's too emotionally involved. He's a Lannister. Cersei and Jaime are his siblings. No matter what is going on here, he's torn. And I'm surprised that Daenerys hasn't said, Tyrion, this whole thing is hitting too close to home for you. So you sit this one out and I'll take it from here. How does Daenerys not see this? And why did Daenerys tell Tyrion that Jaime had been caught? Seeing how Tyrion has been borderline treasonous, I would have locked up Tyrion in a cell until the war was over, punishing him for not confiding in me what Sansa had confessed to him. This doesn't make any sense. The characters are acting very stupid. Obviously, she had to tell Tyrion as a plot device so he could go over there and free Jaime. Now, it did give us a very nice moment between the two brothers, the two characters. But again, this is stupidity, and the Game of Thrones characters have never been stupid. Remember in past seasons how excited we were when we found out that this little baby was actually Jon Snow, who is actually Aegon Targaryen, that he's the true heir to the throne. Well, when Sam finally told Jon Snow, I expected some fireworks, but instead it was very quiet, very subdued, because they rushed this. Otherwise, Jon Snow would have said, wait a minute, you're telling me I'm not a bastard? That's not true. Let me see that book you're talking about. When Jon Snow told Daenerys, it was a few moments before the Battle of Winterfell. And she did react like, oh, you're the heir to the throne? Never mind, you're my nephew. I mean, later on, Jon Snow tells Arya and Sansa through Bronn, but it's done off screen. And then after that, Sansa holds a secret for less than 15 minutes, and she tells Tyrion, again, off screen. And then Tyrion goes over to tell Varys, and of course, that causes Varys' downfall. This was all rush in less than 2 episodes. I say the actors, the characters, the story, and most of all, the fans deserved better. Another problem I have is with characters like Jon Snow escaping death time after time after time, beating impossible odds. It just, well, I know we have to suspend belief sometimes, but it becomes ridiculous. And then you have characters, well, like Uncle Benjen, who shows up once or twice every couple of seasons to save somebody, and that's about it. Another aspect from a previous season was, well, Littlefinger. Littlefinger, his death was a little bit better played out than Varys's, but not much better. And then came the biggest blunder of all, the Mad Queen, Daenerys. We had followed her character since season 1. We've seen her abused and suffering and followed her path to queenhood. She liberated cities and liberated slaves. And yes, there were hints of ruthless cruelty, stubbornness, and capacity for violence. But genocide? Nobody was ready. An example of this is when Jaime left Brienne. Everybody was disappointed, but it was in character. I mean, we know his capacity for cruelty. I mean, he pushed a kid out of a window in episode 1. So it was in character. It fitted. Whether it was through war or something else, we needed to see Daenerys carry out acts of genocide so we could see this side of her. Not little hints, but actual displays of this cruelty. Whether we take a step back so we could accept her as a character and hope that she improves, that's fine. But we need to know that this is the person she's going to become. We needed to see more scenes, such as when she executed the Tarleys. Now, Lord Tarley was executed because he refused to bend the knee. But if you see that scene again, you'll notice that he says he wouldn't bend the knee to her because she was a foreigner. So Daenerys feels rejected. It doesn't matter what she does or who she conquers. She is a foreigner. She's an outsider. She has him executed. We have seen scenes in the past where the Starks, Ned, Jon, and Robb have executed people, but they don't feel any satisfaction of doing it. They do it through duty. Now, Joffrey, on the other hand, he's a sadist. Now, Daenerys, when she have the Tarleys executed, there's a smugness to it. There is no remorse here. It's a good scene. We needed to see more scenes like that. And Daenerys here in this particular scene with the Tarleys, she didn't liberate any slaves. It was bend the knee to me or you will be executed. Now, can you imagine if this would have led to her also executing the little girl that was working with Varys? We would have rejected her, I guess. If the episodes would have been stretched out, by the time we reached the genocidal stage, we would have been ready. We saw Walter White in the TV show Breaking Bad go from high school teacher to meth drug lord. There was a progression to the character. We accepted and believed every step of the way. So Daenerys and Jon Snow and the troops easily take King's Landing. I mean, Daenerys has won. But while she's sitting on the dragon, we need to have hints of her thinking, her thought process. Maybe her remembering that she's being rejected by the North. Nobody appreciates her. They would not have won the Battle of Winterfell without her dragons, and yet here she is, and she's getting no appreciation. And her thought that Jon Snow, like it or not, would probably get the throne, no matter what she does, well, something in her snaps. When she looks over at the Red Keep, she says, you know what? I'm going to go over there and I'm just going to destroy the city. And so she does. If this had been played right, what a shock it would have been, but it would have been acceptable. In essence, the way it played out was horrible. It was a horrible group of scenes, but it would have fit the character if we had seen the progression. So she sets out to burn the city to the ground. This provokes a bloodlust in another beloved character, Grey Worm. The Unsullied go out and just mow down Cersei's troops. Jon Snow is unable to stop them. They will not fall back, and what follows is a massacre. And sadly, acts of cruelty and rape. So, did I like anything? Well, HBO is gets A+, A+, A+ for production value. I have to give them that. Also, the battle between the Hound and the Mountain was superb. I have one complaint about it, and that is basically what they turned the Mountain into. He was kind of like a Friday the 13th character. And I know he's a kind of a zombie, but it didn't quite work for me. But I did like how the brothers died in an embrace, falling into the fire. And another pair of siblings also died in an embrace. That was Cersei and Jaime. Hateful, incestuous, but fascinating. I liked how they used Arya as a focal point, running through the destruction. And again, I will repeat, HBO pulls no punches when it comes to production value. So there's one episode left, and what is going to happen? What is Jon Snow going to do with his unhinged girlfriend? Who's going to win the Game of Thrones? Jon Snow? Daenerys? Arya? Sansa? Bronn? Gendry? I don't know. My guess is that it will be Tyrion. I think that Tyrion either will die in the last episode or he will win the Game of Thrones. I don't see a middle ground for him here. And while I still love Game of Thrones, what a shame that they stumbled at the finish line. What would have happened if HBO would have just hired a couple of other writers? Maybe keep the original writers as consultants or something. Flesh out the story to 30 episodes like the original plan instead of 13. It's a damn shame, and I just feel sad thinking what could have been. But all is not lost. Maybe the last episode will be good, but in the meantime, George R.R. Martin is planning a prequel to Game of Thrones. Stories that happened thousands of years before the events that we saw. He made a deal with HBO, and they're going to begin filming this year. So, hopefully they'll do it right this time. Well, that's it. In the meantime, this is Cool Talk. Send me your likes, comment below, or better yet, subscribe. Thanks for watching.